For the opening remarks, I would like to invite Lieutenant General Retired Majid Ehsan, Hilal Imtiaz Military. He is a retired 3-star general of the Pakistan Army with over 35 years of distinguished service, having varied command, staff, and instructional experiences. As a Lieutenant General, he has been President of National Defence University Islamabad and Commander 4 Corps Lahore. He holds multiple advanced degrees in defence and strategic studies from Pakistan and Egypt. Please welcome President Islamabad Policy Research Institute, Lieutenant General Majid Ehsan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Zafar, Masud, esteemed and honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. As you know, we are all here today to celebrate the launch of C1C, a book by Mr. Zafar Masud, and I'd like to thank him for taking this opportunity for honoring IPRI for this launch ceremony. This is the first launch in Islamabad. I'd also like to thank all of you for sparing your time and making this ceremony more colorful and full of grace. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been less than a month that I took over as President IPRI, and this book launch was earlier coordinated and planned by my predecessor, Raza, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank him also for organizing such a wonderful ceremony. For me, finding out this book regarding the sad incident, rather I would say the saddest incident of Pakistan aviation history of 22nd May 2020 was very disturbing. I was commanding 4 Corps in those days, and Major Shahriyar Fazal, who was a BM in 15 Heavy Mechanized Brigade of Lahore Corps, was also traveling with his wife and 3 kids in this flight, and they all embraced Shahada. So remembering them and remembering the time once I had to talk to their fathers for express my condolences was really very disturbing for me initially. So I was very disturbed actually, how would I cope with this feeling of disturbance and sadness. But then I decided to read the book, and what an experience was for me to read the book of Mr. Zafar Masud. I was totally immersed and came out from after reading this book full of admiration, humility, and insight. Admiration obviously for the writer, but humility to find out how little I knew about this angle of the world, this angle of the life. And insight to find out how ignorant and how much we have to unlearn once we grow up in our lives. And one wonders how could he go through all this experience and write such a live experience in this book for everyone else to read. The answer I try to find out lies in the fact that this is the personality of a self-actualized and self-esteemed individual who could do this. There is a very small verse of Allama Iqbal's in his poem called Saki Nama in Bale Jibreel. I would like to read it out for you. He says, ये मौजे नफस क्या है तलवार है, खुदी क्या है तलवार की धार है. Now the small interpretation of this is, what is this whiff of air, what we call breathing? And then he answers, this is a sword. And then he says, what is self-actualization? And then he answers, this is the sharp edge of the sword. Now see, sword symbolizes honor, dignity, strength, victory, and the characteristics of a sword lies in the sharpness of its edges. That what actually enables the person. Probably the character, the strength of character, and the honor which one carries cannot be actually visualized unless there is a self-actualization in the person. So it was his personality of his self-actualized and self-esteemed personality which could see through the fog of those miseries, excruciating pains of the treatment which he underwent for a long duration, that he could see through the fog and come up with this wonderful book, which is not only a great learning for people like me, but is also a great service to the posterity. I would not take much of your time, ladies and gentlemen, because we would all like to spend maximum time with the writer ourselves. But I have two excerpts from his book which I couldn't stop myself for sharing. One it says at page 169 that since the crash opened my life, I have come to realize that boldness does not have to mean overt actions of heroism and bravery. In fact, it may very well be opposite. Having the strength to reject traditional outdated ideas about suffering through pain and stiff upper lip and refusing assistance, this for mental health when we most need it, even if this plea challenges some toxic but normalized ideas of masculinity, can be boldness. And then on page 209 he writes, if all of us individually see the privileges, wealth or positions we have as proof of our survival in an uneven, unjust world, then we should all have some degree of survival guilt that propels us to make changes. These are few scripts, and I would like you to spend more time with him. With this, I would request Mr. Zafar Masud to express his feeling. Thank you very much for your time, and I would again take this time to thank all of you for attending this ceremony and making this very graceful. And we are sorry we have limited space, otherwise we would have definitely accommodated all of you in comfortable seats. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Moving on to the key speaker of today, Mr. Zafar Masud, who is a development and social impact focused banker, entrepreneur, public sector expert, and an author. With around 30 years of proven exceptional success stories in development finance, energy, corporate governance, and management. He is a member of the Board of Governors at the Islamabad Policy Research Institute, with extensive experience in senior roles at multinational banks in Pakistan and abroad. He has also contributed to the IMF's task force on framing SOE law established by the Ministry of Finance. Drawing on his deep expertise in banking and finance, Mr. Zafar regularly writes for international and local media on topics such as finance, economics, and energy. He is also the author of publication titled Out of the Box, a collection of his various newspaper op-eds and presentations. He co-authored a publication on pension reforms with the DFID, FCDO consultations for KP government. He was featured, the only one outside the Western Hemisphere, in 30 transformative insights from greatest minds by bestseller author Scott Miller in his book Master Mentors Volume 2. His latest book, Seat 1C, A Survival's Tale of Hope, Resilience and Renewal, is based on his musings as an air crash survivor. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Zafar Masud.
First of all, I would like to thank you, President Sir, Maji Sir, IPRI team,
Excuse me.
Dr. Salman, Brigadier Naveed, and their team for organizing this, and the esteemed guests who are here today. I would also like to thank Khurram Elai Sahab, who is a true intellectual, a budding intellectual. I would say we need more Khurram Elais of the world in this country for us to be a better society, a tolerant society, an educated society. So thank you very much, Dr. for spending time and sharing your comments in my book. Amna is here. Amna is the editor and the researcher. The reality is that Amna is the one who wrote this book.
if you look at the flow of the book, if you look at the English that has been used there, that's not my English. मेरी अंग्रेजी इतनी अच्छी नहीं है. I'm just saying my English is not that great. This is Amna's English, by the way. This is Amna's book. You would remember Zuhair, the other day we were talking about your mashallah, Zuhair is coming out with this book as well. This is exactly what I told you, that Amna did that trick for me. Because as an amateur writer, I had structured the book in a very different way. But then she put the flow in through, and as you said, President South, that you couldn't put the book down as you started reading it. That credit goes to Amna really. Amna, she actually resorted on the first-hand data collection also, the primary data. So she did not merely rely on the secondary data, but she did the primary data as well, which was a painstaking process, but she went through the whole thing. And that has put a new sort of flavor to the entire, this literary proposition. I would also like to thank my publisher, Amina Sayyed. Amina has been a great support right from day one. She helped me in connecting with the international publisher and the agent, and then she published it here as well, and she's doing a great job in terms of supporting me to make sure that the book reaches to the every nook and corner of the country. Although it's an expensive book, which I regret that it could have been cheaper, because the affordability of people is still a question mark. But we're coming up with a paperback where it will become more affordable for people. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my own team, who were involved with me all throughout, who were not required to be involved as such, but they volunteered. They are there always with me. Asad is here, Asad Zia. Asad is a great support for me. Raza Bashir, who is the Chief of Staff and Strategy, he's been a phenomenal help. And then of course my secretary, Abdul Nadeem, who the poor guy has to manage my schedule and manage all my tantrums as well, especially after Nauthar I have become more arrogant. You know that. We work very closely. He's the MD of OGDC, so he is the one who carries all those tantrums for me. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to begin with, why this book? What was the motivation behind it? So, we are all kind of aware of the fact that what will happen life after death, our faith, there are myths about what will happen. But there will be very few people who are fortunate enough who will tell you what will happen right before the death in your life. And I call it a 30-second story. This is basically that 30-second story. And in those 30-second stories, I had certain, unique musings which I think I owe to share with everybody, to share with the larger number of people, so that they would be aware of what they will be experiencing when they come across the situation. And the fact of the matter is that in those 30 seconds you are actually accountable to yourself. So accountable to the God is a completely different phenomena and a different ball game altogether, because he will probably look the other way and pardon you for certain things which we think are important, but he may not be important for him. But in your own eyes, the way you are, you would like to judge yourself within that light. And this is a much more difficult an accountability than the accountability later to my mind. And this is exactly what I experienced. My whole life came in front of me were those 30 seconds, my childhood in Lahore to coming back to Lahore now. And I've tried to capture those 30 seconds in this book and the learnings that I picked up during those 30 seconds. I've also tried to, and this is what Amna and myself discussed when we were working on the research of this book, that we need to draw analogy of what other people who've come back from this kind of experience have been able to share their experiences, musings, and they're pretty similar to what mine were. So we kind of draw that analogy from the history also of similar instances where people have experienced a similar situation. Some of them are actually a reinforcement of my earlier learnings, but some of them were actually new learnings. I have tried to keep this book very matter-of-factish. I have not tried to dramatize it or to sensationalize the whole thing, but the accident per se, the whole story and episode is so traumatic that despite my effort of keeping the drama out of it, it has come through somewhere and cropped up somewhere in the book, which might trigger some kind of sentiments in the victim's family, for which I really apologize. It wasn't intentional. If that has happened, then my apologies for that. Interestingly, as I said earlier, also the amateur writer like myself generally tend to lose the flow. And the way I structured this book, and I named this book, by the way, against my favorite band, the Irish band called The Course, their song called Borrowed Heaven. And I insistently heard that song for the 4 months that I was in the hospital. And that kept me really going. Because of paucity of time, I will not be able to read through from that song, but I would strongly recommend that if you go on the YouTube, you'll find that song, and it's really worth. The lyrics are really something which are moving. So I kind of named this book as Borrowed Heaven or Leased Breath. The lease probably is coming from the fact that I'm a banker, so somewhere the lease piece has to be given. But my publisher just threw the name out. He said, "What are you talking about? Nobody's gonna buy a book with the name called Leased Breath." So I have to sell the book, my friend. You may not be interested. I am. And then he picked up the name Seat 1C, and I'm very glad that he picked up that name because that attracts people's attention. And then when they pick up the book and start reading it, they then do not stop, and they figure out that the message is very different. The relationship of Seat 1C is not overwhelming, or it's not the basic idea of the whole book, but it's the message, it's the lesson from what happened there that has been captured in this book. There is and why Seat 1C? Because there is a myth, and I call it a myth because I don't believe in that my survival had a lot to do with the location of the seat. I don't buy that argument, although the international press has generally portrayed it as the real, reason behind my survival. But my belief is that it was God's doing. It was a miracle. And I tell you why. Because of the simple reason, apart from the fact that I'm not the pious of the sort, or the one who follows the religious rituals in the way they're supposed to be followed. So if anybody who needed to be taken to task in the whole episode, that probably would have been me. But the God spared me because there is something more to it than the seat alone. Secondly, the other survivor, Zubair, was actually sitting on the seat which was 8F on the window side, right in the middle, next to the emergency gate. So that makes me believe that it was beyond the seat location, and it was more of a miracle than anything else. Nevertheless, because the publisher, you have to succumb to economics at some point in time. I guess I had kind of given up to the publisher with the name here at C1C. The larger idea of writing this book is to share those learning, and then make people realize that perhaps they need to set their priorities in a different way, and that if you look at those priorities, and I'm very glad that President has picked up the gist of the book, right? That's exactly what it's the last paragraph from the book, by the way, what you picked up afterward. I'm not reading it off this today because I've read it in many other launches, so I'm going to read something else which is more topical and current in nature. But that is the real gist. And the larger idea is that perhaps through those learnings, some people will be able to set their priorities accordingly. The other important element is that the time to make sure that you have the right priorities and you have the right actions when the going is good. In those 30 seconds, it was like sand, the sea sand slipping off my hand. Really, you had no time to do any reproachment or any compensation of what you really wanted to do or wanted to do differently. It was too late then. So really, if there is anything, and that's the other element that President Sahab, you picked up, the survivor's guilt. The other gist is the no regret syndrome, which I touch upon later on. That at that time you should not have any regrets, that you should have done this or you should have done it differently. And that has to be done when the going is good, not when it's too late. And then, of course, it's very important, and I'm going to talk about it today, the importance of communication and leaving the legacy behind. I think these are very important learnings that we need to be aware of. I'm going to start reading from the book now, and first, although there are 10 learnings, starting from from arrogance to bold steps to willpower, and then it goes on to my favorite chapter, by the way, is rituals, to legacy and to communication. But I'm going to pick up 3 topics today, which, as I said, is quite topical in the sense that hubris that we are seeing right now on the global front at the country's levels is something which is very unfortunate. So I'm going to read the first learning from arrogance chapter, and that fits in quite appropriately with the unfortunate situation that we are seeing at the border, the unfortunate situation that we're seeing in Gaza. And I think that it's not just the institutional decay which is a challenge, but it's also the individual level. Arrogance serves no purpose, and it's a total disaster and a killer for that individual, for that institution, but for the people who are dependent on that institution. And same goes, if I have to amplify this whole concept, on the countries as well. And the impact on the country is much more deeper, and I'll talk about this in a bit in the sincerity chapter of what I've written, and that seemed to be fitting in with the existing, with the current hubris that we're witnessing, across the border, unfortunately. So first reading from the chapter called Arrogance. Um, as someone deeply entrenched in the business world, I find myself constantly thinking about the kind of large-scale institutional decay. Having held senior positions in the multinational banks across Pakistan and abroad, my interest in the way that large, successful businesses, industries, and even empires turn into decrepit relics of the past, not entirely triggered by the crash. It is also fueled by the professional curiosity that keeps me going up the corporate ladder. I find examples of this decay strewn across time in the way that national level sports teams spiral towards after years of seemingly perennial success, and also in the way historic empires deemed too large to fail come crashing down. Deemed too large to fail come crashing down. The single trait that precedes this downfall is almost invariably the same: arrogance. After the crash, it was even more I was even more curious to see how systemic arrogance could lead to industry-wide collapse and affect individual leaders in general. Even on the individual level, arrogance serves no purpose. So institution we talked about, now individual level. At best, it lowers others' opinion of you. At worst, your inflated sense of self can have disastrous consequences for those around you. I do not claim to be aggressively humble, but a decent dose of humility and self-reflection can keep disaster at bay. Not all of us are pilots in charge of hulking pieces of metal lurching through the sky, but we are all susceptible on the occasional self-congratulatory thought. So how energetically should we defend ourselves against such thoughts? When I ask myself this question, I am usually reminded of Ray Samrovi's couplet. He was celebrated scholar and poet and my grandfather's elder brother. कहने लगे कि हमको तबाही का गम नहीं, कहने लगे कि हमको तबाही का गम नहीं, मैंने कहा वजह तबाही यही तो है। हम लोग हैं अज़ाब इलाही से बेखबर, हम लोग हैं अज़ाब इलाही से बेखबर, सबसे बड़ा अज़ाब इलाही यही तो है। With apologies to the High Commissioner, there is an English version of it here as well, but it will really lose the essence. So I'll explain it to you later. But in the interest of keeping the the spirit alive, I'll keep it in Urdu for the time. And trust me, this is the last Urdu here. In this simple, unadorned poetry, Amrobi gets to the heart of the matter when he forgets that he can destroy, or that we are not too big or important to fail. We bring about our destruction. Ladies and gentlemen, that fits squarely with what we are witnessing right now across the border. People are hubris, people are thinking that they're too important and too big to fail. This doesn't happen. And I will now share with you later on in the decision of sincerity how it has become a real disaster for the public in general when you do not take the decision in sincerity. So, another key learning was sincerity and bold decisions. President has very rightly picked up the message from the bold decisions. Bold decision doesn't mean that you have to be, over aggressive about certain things and you ignore the risks and the realities on the ground. It means that you need to capture all those, the risks which are on the way, but more so the after effects and the side effects and the collateral damage that will create your bold decision on other people. And this is where the sincerity of decision comes into play. And it's easier said than done. But if you are sincere with yourself, I guess you will be able to overcome a lots of lots of problems that could potentially occur because of your decisions. And the sincerity with the others. At times you have to kill your own interest to actually advise people what is necessary in the larger scheme of things, and that's the most difficult thing. It's easier said than done. This crash is actually a result of those lack of sincere decisions in multiple ways. It is an ecosystem failure, not just the failure of one or two or three people or individuals for that matter. You know yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, and you must act accordingly. If we can be sincere with ourselves, then we will be able to figure out what we are capable of doing and what we are not, and then we move in accordingly. And this result, what I picked up from this whole story of crash was actually because of overestimation of one's abilities of managing situation, and hence a disaster which led to almost 100 people perished. Cognitive reframing is something which is occasionally important and must be done. And we must take things head on and address them. Thank you for highlighting, President Saab, the piece on mental health, because one of the most difficult decisions for me was to going through the therapy after the crash. And by the way, to tell you the truth, the book was first launched on 22nd of February. High Commissioner was there, but in a separate hall. And since then, there was a kind of a lull in the middle because of Ramzan. But since then, the momentum has picked up, and this is my 6th or 7th book read. I have kind of begun to realize that I need to go to the therapist again. I really think so. And I must admit that there's no point in hiding behind the fact or showing yourself very brave or bravery act. I don't think so. I think I realized this, that my tantrums have increased. Lak Saab can bear me on this. My team is sitting here. Asad is here. Fahad is here. I think this is all a kind of a side effect of reading through this again and again, and it's triggering it at the back of my mind, which probably I'm ignoring. But I really think I need to go and now consult with the psychologist, which is not an easy thing to do, but nevertheless, people tend to think that you are lost it, which generally people think about myself. But it will be kind of a reinforcement if the psychologist also says there is something wrong, my friend. So it's taking that, my sort of important role at the bank or at GBC or at Pakistan Banks Association, I think that's all secondary. The important thing is, if I am actually not mentally strong enough, then I should not be in any of those positions, because I'll do more damage at the end of the day than help. And I think it's a larger responsibility on me to tackle this. Physical recovery is continuing, although I've stopped taking the walking stick, but it's very much there, and there is a big operation which is still pending. But nevertheless, the real therapy comes from your loved ones, from your friends, from people like yourselves who are sitting here, who are here for me at 11 o'clock in the morning. You left your office behind and come here. I'm really touched with that, and that keeps you going and motivates you to do the right thing. Now I'm going to read from the chapter on sincerity. A piece of it is already captured by President Saab already, but what I'm going to read is not something which he sort of talked about. Again, this fits in perfectly with the prevailing situation, fortunately or unfortunately, but nevertheless. Amrita Sen, the Indian-born economist and Nobel laureate, argued in 1981 that the death of close to 3 million people had happened because of wartime inflation, speculative buying, and panic hoarding. Journalist Mudeshri Mukherjee takes this one step further and argues that the famine was exacerbated by the decision of Winston Churchill's wartime cabinet in London. Churchill's wartime cabinet was repeatedly warned not to export rice from India to the rest of the empire of the war for the war effort, but they continued to do so. While India's then Viceroy was pleading for an emergency stock of 1 million tons of wheat to alleviate the famine in Bengal, British forces continued to remove rice stocks from the country. Churchill blamed the Indians for breeding like rabbits and even questioned the severity of the shortages of repeatedly asking why Mahatma Gandhi was still alive if the situation was so terrible. It is clear that while Churchill's strategy led the British to victory, his legacy is one that is tainted by the blood of millions of Indians. And the similar situation, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we are kind of confronted with right now. Italian philosopher and Roman statesman Marcus Cicero urged politicians to make sincerity a cornerstone of their character. Today, I understand that this sincerity is important not only for your own personal moral record, but also because the smallest act of insincerity can affect collective histories, ideologies, and collective trauma that societies carry as a result. So this whole, the threat of a potential conflict could have very deeper and larger consequences on people in general. At the end, ladies and gentlemen, I will now cover some challenges that I faced as post recovery and the communication. Why is communication important? And I'm very thankful to IPRI for organizing this, part of the overall communication effort which is there. And this book, by the way, is also an effort of communicating those ideas and making them more permanent in nature in this transitory world. Ladies and gentlemen, we tend to ignore some trivial things in life which become very important. So in my case, for example, for 5 years I was on the wheelchair, and then I was carrying and walking through the walking stick. But in London, when I was there during the Eid holidays just now, I forgot my stick in the taxi, and that forced me to spend the whole day, which was a hectic day. By the way, unlike Pakistan, you have to walk a lot in London, so whether you like it or not, that's the way it is. Well, I love it though, and that leads to me, leaving that walking aid behind. What motivated me the most for leaving that walking stick behind was the fact that I felt so liberated that I'm not dependent on anything for walking around and for my daily life, which I probably never realized when I was using it. But I only when I experienced the whole thing, I realized how these trivial things are important and make a big difference in your life. The two learnings from those 10 learnings, the gist of those learnings, are survivor's guilt and no regret syndrome. Survivor's guilt, in a way, already captured by President Saab. But I would only like to say that it's a privilege. It's a privilege, and if we all see this as a privilege in this uneven, unjust world that we are operating in, we all are the lot which is sitting here, all are very privileged people. And we must realize that that privilege is something that us keep us going, but then we owe this to the society in general, and we have to give this back rather than, considering this as our right or something that we've been destined for. The other one is the no regret syndrome. On those 30 seconds when I was there, my life came in front of me, and I realized that, I had no regrets in life. And now this has become a big liability on me, to tell you the truth. Because that is now, I have to take every step so carefully that, one has to go sooner or later, one way or the other. But at that time, you should not have any regrets whatsoever. So therefore, that's another key learning. And I wanted to share it with everybody so that, you can also see, how that fits in your perspective of life. What the post recovery, the thing that has kept me going is the concept of glass half full. I've always been a very optimistic guy, but I kept my optimism going. Even at the time of the crash, I was very optimistic that I will survive. And I think that glass half full is something which is very important to keep this going. I'm communicating it with everybody so that we'll be able to share some thoughts which may do some good to you. And as part of communication, we need to also figure out what our legacy should be. My sense is that the legacy should be, and this is what I realized when I came back to the hospital after the crash. That was the time when I realized that people were not sure whether I was alive or not. I wasn't sure whether I was alive or not. But I saw the reaction of the people towards me. They were not the entire country was actually praying, to tell you the truth, virtually. But the people who were there, the love and affection that I saw in their eyes changed my perspective towards people and what is important and what is important not. The legacy should be quality driven, not quantity driven. We tend to ignore that fact. Whoever people, 5 or 10 or 20 people we touch, it should be quality touch rather than looking towards the quality. The communication is the most important thing, and if the communication was good at that day, this disaster would have been averted. It must be succinct, it must be or direct, it must be honest, it must be with all sincerity and without any biases and hubris, and that's what makes the real difference in terms of impacting people. I will end now with a brief read from the communications chapter. Sorry for stretching a time by a few minutes, but this is really the end, and it's not a very extensive one either. The whole ordeal that my fellow passenger and I went through on 22nd May 2020 came partly from a catastrophic failure in communication at all levels. If the captain had heard the frantic warnings in the voice of the ground control operative who told him the plane was higher than the required descent profile at Makli, this disaster could have been avoided. If the ground control had communicated effectively with the captain, informing him of the presence of sparks after the plane first touched down and scraped the landing strip before taking off again, he may not have ascended again to the height that he did. A small part of me even believes that if the pilot had kept up a steady line of communication with the passengers, perhaps he could have given people more time to come to terms with what was happening. I do not necessarily believe this would have saved more lives, given the logistics of the crash, but I do believe it would have brought some degree of calm within the cabin at the end. It would have afforded some dignity to the passengers who were about to lose their lives and given them a moment to make peace with their God. As someone who has experienced this fleeting feeling, I do not take it lightly, nor can I undersell what my communication with my God before the crash meant to me to appease more secular among you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. A very purposeful and impactful talk. And before you shared something from the book, you spoke so high about Sayyidah Amna Hassan, and it's unjust if we don't listen to you as well. Sayyidah Amna Hassan, you're a journalist focused on climate change, animal conservation, terrorism, and national security. Your work has been published in several media outlets, including National Geographic and the Pulitzer Center. You also served as a private investigator for international law firms, defending Pakistani clients accused of criminal activity based on thin or inconclusive evidence. Let's hear from you, Amna.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and to remain behind the scenes. So I know that this is a very unique position that I'm in. If I'm being frank with you, I'm also more comfortable behind the scenes. But I'm very grateful for all of you for inviting me here and for IPRI as well. I do think that the thing that cements this book as an important piece of literature is the story itself, but the story that's driving it, because it's a very human story, it's a very compelling story, and I'm very honored that I got to play a part in telling it. This is where the other people who were involved in the crash come in. So by the time I got involved with the project, Mr. Masud had already spoken to the only other survivor, Zubair. He had already spoken to the people who pulled him out of the burning wreckage of the car that he landed on, because he wanted to thank them. And so once I got involved, then we spoke to them again and we interviewed them again, because what we basically wanted to do was construct a timeline of events that would help us tell the story to people who weren't familiar with it at all. So what we had available to us were accounts of eyewitnesses on the ground. We had residents of Model Colony. We had paramedics who performed the rescue operations. We had just a bunch of people who were teaming around within that chaos. And they remembered very vivid details about how that day unfolded. So determining things like how long it took for each of them to arrive on the scene, what they saw, how they moved from point A to point B, that sort of helped us develop a time-stamped geospatial understanding of the event. And it also helped us with the less clinical details, because we have to be more personal and less clinical when it comes to an event of this magnitude, an event that is this traumatic. Things like the very visceral kind of dread or gloom or panic that they felt while they were on the scene, or the kind of smells that the plane was emitting while it was burning and while they were on the scene, how far the ambulance drivers were and what kind of routes they had to take just to get to a place where they could safely pull the two people who survived. These are all important things to know, and we were very grateful that all of these people cooperated with us and told us their stories. We also had reports from the Civil Aviation Authority that just had a lot of information that was waiting to be mined. So that was very helpful. I've spoken about this before, at the time that we were writing this book, we could have told you exactly which part of the street, which part of the plane landed on. The reports are that detailed, so they were very helpful to us. And then once that structure was clear and we had the facts down in chronological order, That's when we went back to the very personal lessons that Mr. Masud drew from the crash, from the whole ordeal, and we wove them back into the narrative. And so they remain the central driving force of the story. One thing that we were very cognizant of was the very fraught relationship that memory and trauma have. So there was a lot of chaos on that day, which means that people couldn't possibly have perfectly preserved memories. They were operating in an extremely high stress situation. And so we had to do a lot of work to take all of those narratives and collate them so that we would have one coherent picture that made sense. And we also wanted to make sure that we were depicting the horror of that day without being too graphic. I love this quote by Janet Malcolm, who wrote a book called The Journalist and the Murderer, who says, "Every journalist who is not too stupid or too full of himself to know what is going on knows that what he does is morally indefensible." And I, as a journalist, don't fully agree, but I do think that there is some value in constantly examining and re-examining the work that you're doing to try to make sure that you're not veering into that territory of the morally indefensible. Because you're essentially mining a tragedy for information. And it's important information, it's information that the public should have, but you don't want to fuel voyeurism. And disasters tend to draw voyeurs in any case. So that was something that we were very conscious of while we were writing this. We wanted to remain respectful to the memory of the people who had passed away, and it's a very difficult balancing act when you're doing that. And some people, as you said, they still might not agree that we did a good job of that because it's a very subjective thing, but we did try very hard. So the final story that we have in the book, it's still very accurate. It's still a very chilling story or a chilling narrative of what happened on that day. But for instance, you can't really recognize any of the victims from our descriptions of the bodies that were pulled out. That was something we wanted to make sure, okay, yeah, this cannot happen. This would be too painful for people who are related to them. And I knew that that was also something that was very important to Mr. Masood. मुझे ये पता था कि at any point I would not get any pushback on any kind of ethical consideration while I was doing the editing. So that made it very easy to work on the book. Because I think Sir is probably more careful than I am. So that's the main thing I want people to take away from it is we've worked very hard to tell a very personal story as accurately and as respectfully as possible. And I think in some ways it was easier because we were writing from the perspective of a survivor, someone who was part of the story and his journey to understand what had happened. It's a very important voice that needed to be heard. So that made things a little bit easier on the ethical front. But we have been as sincere as we could in telling that story. And yeah, I hope you enjoy reading it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Before we take questions, moving on to the last speaker, Dr. Khurram Ilahi, who recently completed his PhD, where his doctoral research, inspired by the poetry of Iqbal, integrates philosophical insights with actionable business strategies. This unique blend of philosophy and business acumen positions Khurram as a thought leader in the field of leadership development. Khurram is the author of 2 influential books, including Managers as Little Prince, which was presented at the House of Lords in the UK. His work merges literary wisdom with modern management practices, providing readers with profound insights into effective leadership. Khurram Ilahi's contributions to the field extend to television appearances on programs like Nukta on PTV Home, ATV and Hum TV. He has also delivered 2 impactful TED Talks, further establishing his authority as a leadership expert. His insights are regularly featured in numerous podcasts, expanding his reach and influence across various platforms. Let's hear from Dr. Khurram Ilahi.
हजरत की तरफ जब इनकी किताब डॉक्टर नील के तरफ से मौसूल हुई, असल हादसा ये नहीं है कि ये जहाज में बचे हैं, اصل حادثہ یہ ہوتا ہے اگر مسعود صاحب کتاب نہ لکھ پاتے. تو جان کا شعر ہے کہ ایک ہی حادثہ تو ہے اور وہ یہ کہ بات نہیں کہی گئی, بات نہیں سنی گئی. حضور اگر آپ آگے سے ہٹ جائیں تو میں عام سی باتیں کر رہا ہوں, تو جان کی باتیں تو بہت عام ہوتی ہیں. تو جو ایک ہی حادثہ تو ہے اور وہ یہ کہ بات نہیں کہی گئی اور بات نہیں سنی گئی. اور میں ظفر مسعود صاحب سے اتنا ایک قلبی رغبت ان کے والد کو ٹی وی پر دیکھ دیکھ کے ضرور رکھتا ہوں, اور ان سے بھی جتنی ملاقاتیں ہیں, کہ ظفر مسعود صاحب نے ڈیتھ کو سروائیو کیا ہے فار ایور یہ کتاب لکھ کے. جس طرح جنرل صاحب نے اقبال کو کوٹ کیا, وہ تو مر چکا ہے, تو یہ اس کتاب کو یہ کوئی وہ اخبار کی طرح مت پڑھیں, اس طرح کتابیں پڑھی بھی نہیں جاتی. تو میں نے اس کتاب کا ایک حصہ اپنے گھر میں اپنے بچوں کے سامنے اونچی آواز میں بھی پڑھا, اور میں الحمدللہ کوئی انسان ہوں, مجھے بہت فخر ہے اپنے آنسوؤں پہ. اینڈ آئی ریئلی ٹرائیڈ تھنکنگ ہم ایز اے سن. اور ہم وہ چیز نہیں پکڑ پا رہے جو ظفر مسعود صاحب بتانا چاہتے ہیں. وہ سب سے بڑی بات جو ظفر مسعود صاحب نے لکھی ہے وہ میں آپ کو دہرا دیتا ہوں, وہ ہے کہ frequently flying took away my wonder of flights. I was no more Zafar, a 9-year-old. I was a grown-up Zafar. وہ تھامنا تھا ہم نے اس کتاب میں. موت بہت اہم سوال ہے فلسفیوں کے لیے, ڈاکٹر مودت رانا صاحب بتا سکتے ہیں. عجب بات ہے کہ ظفر مسعود صاحب نے زندگی کو مسئلہ بنایا ہے کتاب میں, موت کو نہیں. اصل لٹریری کرٹیسزم کتابوں میں اس طرح دریافت کیا جاتا ہے. So, High Commissioner, I'm saying that he hasn't made death as an issue of his book. Rather, after the near-death experience, or what I call, I love giving new terms to science, or rather than having a pre-death experience. And he's always ready for it now. I found him as a very different man. It's a pre-death experience. کہ تھوڑا چکھ لو بادہ باقی تمہارا تیار رکھا ہے. موت کو سمجھے ہے غافل اختتام میں زندگی, یہ ہے شام زندگی. صبح دعا میں. اور کتاب ہو if I have to speak on George Orwell or Yevgeny, or I have to cover Huxley, or I have to talk about Dostoevsky, I would not have any, I felt this book because I was part of that scene as a citizen who was looking at his father who was on TV and he was declared death. And then through book, Zafar has reclaimed life. Don't find economist in it. This would be the cardinal mistake if you are reading a book. He had, let me read you chapters. Tell me where you find them in curriculum. Chapter number 1. Let me read those. So we also know, as he has said, what is wrong with our economics. لیکن انہوں نے ایک جگہ بڑی پیاری بات فرمائی ہے, تو مجھے آزادی مل گئی کہ ایک ان کو سروائیول گلٹ ہوا, وہ اصل میں ہمیں دینا چاہتے ہیں, اور انہوں نے سمجھایا بھی ہے کہ تم سب ایلیٹس کو بھی سروائیول گلٹ ہونا چاہیے. یہ بھی سروائیول گلٹ میں معلوم نہیں ہے انفلیشن میں. لوگ بس آدمی ہنسے دیکھو, شہر پھر بسے دیکھو, اور آدمی نہیں ہنس رہا. اصل وہ بات ظفر صاحب نے بیچ میں کہی بھی ہے دبے لفظوں میں, کہ آپ جانتے ہیں احتیاط بہت ضروری اس ملک میں. اب آپ ان کے چیپٹرز کے نام دیکھیے. ایک اکانومسٹ کتاب لکھ رہا ہے, چیپٹر 1 ہے ایروگنس, چیپٹر 2 ہے ڈیوز, چلو یہ کسی حد تک ہے, گڈنس, سنسیرٹی.
Dues are in the context of emotional dues.
Life.
The banker is there. The financial dues are important.
Not
at all. Actually, I am writing the books down.
اب آپ یہ دیکھیے کہ جب میرے ایک بہت عزیز استاد ہیں, وہ میرے برخوردار ہیں, صاحبزادہ سید شاہ حسین صاحب. So I was reading the book loud and I had a tear in my eye کہ یار just imagine the pain this man has gone through, surviving a plane crash, such a tragic thing. Sometimes death becomes such an easy way to take exit from life, but not dragging of life. What my Ammi will be thinking about. She hasn't seen Zafar using a stick. وہ آپ سب نہیں دیکھ پا رہے کتاب میں, وہ لکھا ہے انہوں نے, لیکن آپ کیونکہ ہمیں نا اصل میں آداب نے, یفغانی کی کتاب پڑھیں وی, ہمیں نمبرز نے اب نم کر دیا ہے. وی آر نمڈ بائی اکنامکس. one of the most fictitious subject of science. And یہاں انہوں نے ایک بڑی پیاری بات کی. So I asked my son, there are many people who reclaim life after death due to a near-death experience. One greatest is Hazrat Fariduddin Attar. The fakir died in front of him and he said that Attar, تم مرنے کے لائق بھی نہیں. And he died. And Hazrat Fariduddin Attar was a perfumer and he changed his life and he wrote the famous book Conference of the Birds, which alhamdulillah no one in our country would like to read. The Conference of the Birds by Fariduddin Attar. But the finest thing my son told me that you should tell Zafar Sahab. یہ بہت ہی عام موضوع ہے اس کتاب کا, بہت عام. اور میں جہاں موجود ہوں, اگر آپ چاہیں تو ظفر صاحب سے اختلاف کروا لیں کہ بچہ غلط کہہ رہے ہیں, آپ اختلاف کریں. اگر آپ میں سے کسی نے 100 Years of Solitude Gabriel Garcia Marquez, if you've read that, what is the first line? Colonel Aureliano Buendía was standing in front of the firing squad, guns right aiming at him. And he thought about the first day when his father took him to see ice. This is what Zafar Sahab has written. That when I was dying, it was not me, I was more worried for the people, the Jews. This book hasn't touched death anywhere near. This book has only taught us what we have failed to live as mankind. And being the CEO of a company where you just talk about money, this book is an anti-narrative. It is a Marxist inquiry to what we are living as mankind. By a person who has peeped into the window of death very successfully. Second person which has God has blessed Zafar to be in this stand is Fyodor Dostoevsky, who in 1849 was also taken to the firing squad, and he survived and he wrote the masterpiece Brothers Karamazov and Idiot and Crime and Punishment and things like that. So at page 62, Zafar has talked about grief. But Zafar Sahab, honestly, you're just a human being, we've seen that, and I'm just a human being. He talks about grief in such beautiful terms. And when as an economist has to talk about grief, he runs an econometric scale. But here Zafar has talked about it, and Zafar as a man, and Zafar as a homo tantum, this is a beautiful term I want to give him today. کہ جب یہ جہاز میں گرے پڑے ہیں, اب تو خاتون چلی گی, میں اور اردو میں بات کر رہا ہوں, کہ جب جہاز میں گرے پڑے انہوں نے لکھا ہے کتاب میں, تو ایک ٹرم ہوتی ہے فلسفے کی ہومو ٹینٹم. حضور, اس کا کوئی نام نہیں ہوتا مگر اسے کسی اور نام سے پکارا نہیں جا سکتا. ظفر کا اس دن کوئی نام نہیں تھا اور اس کو کسی پرویز کہہ کے بھی نہیں پکارا جا سکتا, وہ 1C تھا. تو انہوں نے پھر ٹائٹل میں جس نے رکھا ہے بہت اچھا کیا کہ اس نے 1C کو پریزرو کرنے کی کوشش کی, اور یہ بہت بڑا معجزہ ہے, بہت ہی بڑا معجزہ ہے. دوسری ایک اہم بات میرا یہ خیال ہے کہ جو انہوں نے بہت بہادری سے اس مملکت خداداد میں کی, کہ اس کتاب کو غیر ضروری مذہبی رنگ سے بچا لیا. اور مودت رانا صاحب جانتے ہیں کہ میں مرید ہوں ایک ایسے آدمی کا جن کا نام احمد جاوید ہے, مگر پھر بھی اصل مارکا وہ بھی بیچ میں شامل ہے. سب سے سان کم سی اللہ تے پاک ہے سارے اپنے ول کر لیں. بٹ ہی ٹوک اے ڈیفیکلٹ جرنی. لیکن ایک بات, میرے لیے کتابیں بہت سنجیدہ عمل ہے بھائی, اور وہ انہوں نے کہہ دی اور میں وہاں سے واہ واہ کرتا رہا. ڈاکٹر نیل دی فائنسٹ تھنگ از, ظفر صاحب نے ایک بات بتانے کی کوشش کی ہے کہ عقل علم نہیں پیدا کرتی, عقل علم کی حدود پیدا کرتی ہے. آگے امی بیٹھی تھی. It was not 1C which saved me. There are 30,000 crashes where 1C has died first. So he hasn't preserved miracle, but he has said کہ عقل کی کچھ حدود ہوتی ہیں. وہاں انہوں نے جس آدمی کا ریفرنس دیا ہے, اکیلا پاکستان کو زوال سے اس کا کام نکال سکتا ہے, وہ ہے امانوئل کانٹ, کریٹیک آف پیور ریزن. عقل علم نہیں پیدا کرتی, عقل حدود پیدا کر رہی ہوتی ہے. تو ظفر صاحب نے ان حدود کو توڑتے ہوئے سروائیو کیا. میں نے ان کو چھڑی میں دیکھا اور آج ان کو میں نے چھڑی کے بغیر دیکھا, اور یہ میرے لیے بہت خوشی کی بات ہے ان کو چھڑی کے بغیر دیکھنا. ظفر صاحب نے ہمیں 3 اہم باتیں بتانے کی بیچ میں کوشش کی ہے کہ زندگی ہیپینس ہے, زندگی سنسیریٹی ہے, اور زندگی ریکلیمڈ لائف ہے. خدا کی قسم ہم سب کا طیارہ گر چکا ہے لیکن ہمیں بچانے والا کوئی نہیں ہے. ہم وہ میں لائن دہرانا چاہوں گا بیکٹ کی, جو انہوں نے بار بار لکھی کہ میں لاہور گیا, میں واپس آیا. مجھے بھائی ظفر کو سانس تو لینے دو. اللہ نے آپ کو سانس دلوایا اس فلائٹ میں. کون ظفر؟ اچھا چلیں, اتنے بڑے آدمی تھے تو پہلے لکھ لیتے نا کتاب, تو صحت میں بھی. تو بیکٹ کی ایک لائن ہے جہاں ولادیمیر کو اسٹیج پہ کھڑے ہو کے دوسرے سے پوچھتا ہے اس طرح کون, دوسرے کردار سے. بیکٹ کا بہت مشہور کردار ہے تھیٹر آف ایبسرڈ میں, تو جانتے ہیں. وہ اسے کہتا ہے آر یو دیر ظفر صاحب؟ تو وہ آگے سے مڑ کے کہتا ہے ایم آئی. یہ کتاب اس ایم آئی کا جواب ہے کہ ظفر صاحب زندہ بچ گئے ہیں. ہمیں ابھی تک دلیل دینے کی کوشش پڑ رہی ہے. میں آپ کے لیے ہمیشہ زندگی میں دعا کروں گا.
I was not the mental health professional that you saw. That's clarification. سر بہت لطف آیا آپ کی کہانی, اور کتاب میں ابھی تک نہیں پڑھ سکا. میں اس وقت سے ایک obsession میں, جب سے یہ آپ کی کتاب کا ٹائٹل پڑھا ہے اس میں ہوں, اور میں اس ٹائٹل کو بار بار اس طرح پڑھ رہا ہوں, سی ایٹ ون. سلام ہے اس شخص کو جس نے اس کتاب کا نام رکھا ہے آپ کے لیے. آپ کو ایک موقع دیا جس کا میرے پیارے پورن نے ابھی ذکر کیا, ٹو سی ون. And that is a thought that I thought I must convey to you, that this book probably demands from you to write 2 more books that I would suggest to you. And the first is to write, if you were born again as Zafar Masud, and with this wisdom that you have collected through sitting on seat 1C and then discovering 1, how would that next Zafar Masud live his life? Because that, I think, would be a recipe for countries like Pakistan, who are going down exactly the same way that your aircraft was going. And it may become place Pakistan at seat 1C. ایک تو یہ آپ سے درخواست ہے, اور دوسری سر ایک یہ کتاب ضرور لکھیے گا کہ یہ جو زندگی اب آپ گزار رہے ہیں, how it has changed you from here onwards. اور یہ کتاب چند سال کے بعد لکھنے کی ضرورت ہے. بیفور اینڈ آفٹر صرف اوبیسٹی کے بارے میں نہیں لکھنا چاہیے, ٹراما کے بارے میں بھی لکھنا چاہیے. Because when traumas of this magnitude occur in human beings, they do, I'm sorry if it is hurtful, they do kill a person on that day, and a new person is born the very next moment. So these are my 2 requests to you.
ایک کویشچن جو آپ کا ایک کمنٹ تھا, میں اس پہ پوچھنا چاہتا ہوں آپ سے, if you feel like answering. I'm someone who's very optimistic, but you mentioned that even when you were going down, you were positive that you will survive. Would like to understand what was behind that positivity, or what is behind that positivity.
Received the book signed by Zafar. Thank you very much. And then I read it and I wrote a review in Margaret Tribune, which I'll be presenting to you. I have one question, but before I do that, I would urge the entire audience that this book is, as everyone said, is about survival. And survival of, yes, air crashes are rare, but each one of us survive in some way, some tragedy or some trauma. And recovering myself, some parts of it and some moments and some sentences were so powerful for me. I would urge the audience to buy this book for not only yourself, but also for your friends who you think are recovering. And my question is very simple, sir. How did you board the plane again?
So पहले तो डॉक्टर साहब बहुत शुक्रिया, आपने एक नई डायमेंशन दी है टू द होल प्रोपोजिशन. मैंने इसको सर्टनली इस सेंस में नहीं देखा था, और मेरा ख्याल है पब्लिशर को भी आपने बहुत क्रेडिट दे दिया, उसने भी इस सेंस में नहीं देखा था. ये आप ही नहीं देखा इस सेंस में, और द क्रेडिट गोज टू यू एक्चुअली. इट्स सो हैपेंड एक्चुअली. जो इसमें इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ है डॉक्टर साहब, आई डोंट नो आपको मौका भी मिला किताब को देखने का या नहीं. आप जब इसको देखेंगे ना तो वाइल सीट 1C में जो इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ है ना वो फेथ है. जो रिचुअल्स है ना उसका पूरा चैप्टर है, वो शायद सबसे लंबा चैप्टर है, वो मेरा फेवरेट चैप्टर है, जिसके अंदर मैंने ये आर्ग्यू करने की कोशिश की है कि कितना इम्पोर्टेंट है रिचुअल्स इन लाइफ. दे वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट, बट द रिजिडिटी ऑफ रिचुअल्स could be a real killer also, a problem for that matter. So therefore it is the faith which is more important to seat 1C की आप बात कर रहे हैं, then the rituals per se, and this is what the gist of this book in many ways is there. जो आपने कहा कि वो किताब, तो बहुत शुक्रिया for giving the ideas. मैंने already by the way आमना के साथ 2 किताबों के ऊपर काम शुरू कर दिया. एक जो है वो हम लिख रहे हैं किताब on the how the financial inclusion would help in bringing the peace within the country and perhaps in the region as well. The topic is still evolving. Amna and myself have discussed it twice. मेरा इसके ऊपर एक आर्टिकल है तो उसी को मैं expand कर रहा हूँ. And the other one is on literature and economy. How far is literature important in the economy and to develop a healthy society. वो I think we tend to ignore that fact. और हम बहुत इसको इस तरह डॉक्टर साहब फरमा रहे थे, हम उसको सिर्फ एक लेंस में इकोनॉमिक्स की देखने लगते. द वर्ल्ड इज बियॉन्ड इकोनॉमिक्स एंड वी मस्ट लुक एट इट बियॉन्ड इकोनॉमिक्स. सो वो दोनों आपने भी 2 बड़े ज़बरदस्त बातें की हैं. आपने जो एक चीज़ कही वो इंटरेस्टिंगली इनफ, रियाज साहब यहाँ तशरीफ रखते हैं, रियाज साहब वाज देयर एट द टॉक. मैंने 2-2.5 साल पहले एक टॉक दी थी एट इस्लामाबाद क्लब में, जिसमें मैंने ये आर्ग्यू किया था कि किस तरह मेरी जो सर्वाइवल है वो और जो पाकिस्तान का नियर क्रैश एक्सपीरियंस है उससे हमें क्या सीखने की ज़रूरत है और क्या चीज़ें ठीक करने की ज़रूरत है. जो आप फरमा रहे हैं वो ऑलरेडी मेरी जो दूसरी किताब है जो पहले से आई थी उसके अंदर उसका एक मजमुआ ऑलरेडी शामिल है इन द फॉर्म ऑफ एन आर्टिकल. वो रियाज साहब वाज देयर. ये हुआ था जुलाई या अगस्त में हुआ था, एंड मुझे याद है जून में वो IMF ने हमें बचा लिया था, वरना हम भी वहाँ क्रैश करने जा रहे थे. तो मैंने उसकी एनालॉजी ड्रॉ की थी कि जो मेरी लर्निंग्स हैं वो किस तरह पाकिस्तान की लर्निंग्स में हेल्प कर सकती हैं. तो दैट इज इन अ वे डॉक्यूमेंटेड, बट आई विल ट्राई एंड एक्सपैंड ऑन इट एज वी गो ऑन. खुरम साहब बहुत शुक्रिया, आपने जो सवाल पूछा. एक्चुअली जो कन्विक्शन होती है ना उसकी कोई जस्टिफिकेशन नहीं होती कि वो कहाँ से आ रही है. इट मे बी सम काइंड ऑफ एन अपब्रिंगिंग ऑफ द सॉर्ट्स और सम काइंड ऑफ सपोर्ट फ्रॉम द इकोसिस्टम दैट यू ड्रॉ, दैट यू फील दैट you have this very strong conviction that things will be all right, and I guess that conviction was there. But the thing which kind of reinforced the whole thing was the fact that when I realized that the plane is about to crash, my whole life came in front of me, from childhood, from Lahore to now coming back to Lahore. And I realized that there are no regrets, as I shared with you earlier. And I have a very strong faith. I'm zero ritualistic, but the faith is very strong. And I believe, and I speak to myself, which I believe I speak to the God. This is really my own conviction, as you can call it, or my own belief, as you could call it. You're most welcome to disagree with that, but this is the way I look at things. So I told myself that, so it's happening, it's right in front of my eyes, and there's no way it can be averted. So the crash is happening, and I said, God, I'm coming, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. मौत से कभी नहीं डरा. I never been scared, ابھی بھی نہیں ڈر لگتا, مگر میں موت سے نہیں کبھی ڈرا. اور وہ میرے اندر میرے باپ سے آئی ہے طاقت. وہ بہت ہی بہادر آدمی ہے, وہ موت سے کبھی انہوں نے بھی گھبراہٹ چھوڑی. جو لکھی ہوئی یہ چیز وہ ہونی ہے, اگر وہ ہونی ہے تو وہ ہونی ہے, پھر وہ کس بات کے لیے. اور وہ علی جو آپ کہہ رہی تھی میں اس کو بھی یہی کور کر دوں گا ابھی, کہ اگر وہ آپ کو اس بات پہ فیتھ ہے کہ آپ کو جو ہے وہ آپ کا فیتھ از ریٹن, تو پھر کس بات کا ڈر ہے آپ کو. پھر تو آپ فیئرلیس ہو جائیں اور پھر آپ کوئی اسٹوپڈ حرکت نہ کریں, جو میں نے شروع میں بھی کہی. مگر ریمیننگ ود ان دا کنفائنس یو شوڈ بی ایبل ٹو ٹیک بولڈ ڈیسیشنز اینڈ بی ایبل ٹو یو نو. وہ کنوکشن جو تھی نا وہ میرے اندر آئی تھی کہ گاڈ دین اینڈ دین آئی سیڈ گاڈ لوکنگ فارورڈ ٹو سیئنگ یو, آئی ایم آل سیٹ ٹو گاڈ. اور میں یہ سمجھتا ہوں کہ میرے اپنے اللہ سے اور میرے رسول سے بہت پکی دوستی ہے. اور انہوں نے جو ہے وہ آگے سے مجھے آواز ہے کہ نو اٹ ول بی آل رائٹ. ایسے وی ٹاکنگ اباؤٹ گاڈ. اچھا, اللہ تعالیٰ سے ایسی میری بات ہوتی ہے جس کو میری والدہ بہت ٹائم ناراض رہتی مجھ سے کہ تم کس طرح بات کرتے ہوئے. وہ برا نہیں مانتے, والدہ برا مان لیتی ہے. جو میں نے آپ سے کہا لائف آفٹر ڈیتھ اللہ تعالیٰ غفور رحیم ہے, وہ معاف کر دے گا. ہم جب اپنے کٹہرے میں 30 سیکنڈ کے لیے کھڑے ہوں گے نا, ہم اتنے چھوٹے لوگ ہیں اور ہم اس اسٹینڈرڈ سے دیکھیں گے کہ ہم شاید اپنے آپ کو معاف نہیں کریں گے. تو اپنے آپ کو اگر بڑا کر لیں گے نا تو آپ اپنے آپ کو بھی معاف کر دیں گے, اور اللہ تعالیٰ نے تو معاف کر ہی دینا ہے شاید اس کو آپ کو, بیکاز وہ غفور رحیم ہے. اس پرنسپل کو ہم بھول جاتے ہیں. تو وہ اس نے کہا کہ نا اٹ ول بی آل رائٹ. I said, what are you talking about? It's all over. It's happening. He said, it's happening, but you'll survive. So probably وہ جو غلام صاحب فرما رہے تھے, وہ جو کنوکشن تھی وہ غالباً یہاں سے بھی آ رہی تھی کہ in a way I was very optimistic and sort of my God told me کہ it will be all right. So probably that conviction was coming from that. عالیہ جو آپ نے بات کی تھی اس میں ایک تو thank you very much. I'm looking forward to 13th now, 13th June. We'll come back, ladies and gentlemen, here. عالیہ کے ساتھ ایک ہم نے اب ایک اور بک ٹاک کرنی ہے on the 13th of June. جو واپس جہاز پہ چڑھنا تھا نا, وہ میری اپنے لیے ضروری تھا, because I wanted to get my head cleared up against any fears. Living with the fears is the worst thing that could happen to you. So اس thought کے ساتھ زندہ رہنا کہ میں تو جہاز پہ کبھی نہیں چڑھ سکتا, یا میں پی آئی اے پہ نہیں چڑھ سکتا, یا میں سیٹ 1C پہ نہیں بیٹھ سکتا. I wanted to completely destroy that idea and concept in my head. So whatever I did it for my own sake, not for. اب اس میں پی آئی اے نے ذرا ایگزوبرنس زیادہ دکھا دی اور انہوں نے اس کو زیادہ مارکیٹنگ کر دیا, جس سے وکٹمس کی فیملی ہرٹ ہوئی. میں اس کو بڑا معذرت خواہ ہوں, بٹ میری کوئی ٹینشن یہ نہیں تھی. میری ٹینشن یہ تھی کہ میری اپنی مینٹل ہیلتھ کے لیے ضروری تھی کہ میں اس کو ہیڈ آن لوں. ڈاکٹر صاحب, ڈاکٹر ظفر تشریف رکھتے ہیں, میں اس کو ہیڈ آن لوں اور ایڈریس کروں, رادر دین ہائڈنگ بیہائنڈ دا ہول تھنگ. اس طرح میں نے آپ سے کہا کہ مینٹل ہیلتھ کا بھی پورا میں نے ایک دور گزارا, اور میں دوبارہ اس میں غالباً دوبارہ شاید اس کے اندر ابھی 12 کروں گا, بیکاز آئی تھنک آئی نیڈ دیٹ. یہ اس طرح کی ٹاک کے بعد جو ہے نا وہ آپ کو تھوڑا سا unknowingly perhaps آپ کے سب کانشیس میں امپیکٹ آتا ہے. تو دیٹ کنوکشن. اچھا وہ ہوا یہ تھا کہ جب میں بیڈ میں تھا, تو میرا تو ہاسپٹل بیڈ میں تھا, تو مجھے تو کوئی اس بات پہ ذرا سا بھی شک نہیں تھا کہ اللہ تعالیٰ کی ڈوئنگ ہے. تو میں نے اپنے آپ سے پنجابی میں بات کی, میں نے کہا یار وہ تو اللہ تعالیٰ نے کرتا ہوں, تو بھی تو کچھ کر لے نا زندگی سے, کہ تو بھی کوئی یہو جہا کام کر لے جہاں کوئی مطلب ہے کہ. And I thought that first thing I do is that I will take my fear head on. The biggest fear for me is to fly back, and I will fly back on the same airline, on the same route, obviously going back to Lahore, and on the same seat, and I'll travel alone. And I traveled alone, although my colleagues insisted that they will accompany me, but they sat behind on purpose, because I didn't want anybody to be alone myself. Not my brother, not my یہ میرا بھائی ہے بیٹھا ہوا ہے عباس. They insisted, but I said nothing doing. یہ دوانا صاحب بیٹھے, he knows کہ ہم ہم ایز اے فیملی بہت زیادہ جڑے ہوئے, and they were not very comfortable with me flying back. علی فرحان نے تو جھگڑا کر دیا تھا وسیم صاحب, اس نے تو علی فرحان نے تو اتنا جھگڑا کیا تھا وسیم کہ یہ ان کے بردر ان لو ہیں, اتنا جھگڑا کیا تھا انہوں نے میرے ساتھ کہ نہیں ہم گاڑی میں جائیں گے. تو رانا صاحب تمہیں پتا ہوتا, بٹ آئی تھاٹ دیٹ از امپورٹنٹ فار می ٹو گیٹ دیٹ فیئر آؤٹ.
You as part of extended family, and of course reading the book, having the book with your autographs, feel very honored. Abhi sirf main do comment karna chahunga, partly connects with what you are saying and what Quran said. Ek term hai ke sira sira, Spanish term hai, what will be will be. So usko main yahan pe connect is tarah se karna chahunga. Is pe ek ہم میں سے آئی مین آف مائی ایج ایک انڈین سانگ بھی ہے, لیکن انڈین سانگ سے شاید آپ کو اس کی ایسنس کا پتہ نہیں چلتا ہے, لیکن اوریجنل سانگ ہے وہ آئی تھنک 1950s کا ہے, if I am recalling it correctly. So why I'm saying it here right now, کہ سرا سرا کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ جو ہونا ہے وہ ہونا ہے. امپورٹنٹ یہ ہے سمجھنا کہ یہ کیوں ہوا. So from this episode, this had to happen. So what Zafar bhai is about to decipher why it happened. The other thing I want to say is that ایک ہوتی ہے imposed will اور ایک ہوتی ہے free will. یہ جو ابھی خرم نے بولا بھی quite boldly کہ آپ نے کتاب لکھنی ہوتی تو پہلے بھی لکھ چکے ہوتے, آپ نے اس کریش کے بعد ہی اس کو کیوں لکھا. سو پرہیپس ہم سب کا جہاز گر چکا, اس ملک کا جہاز گر چکا, لیکن ہم میں سے نہ ملک نے ریکلیم کیا ہے. ضروری نہیں کہ ہم فزیکلی جہاز ہمارا گرے تو ہم ریکلیم کریں. If we can understand the gravity of the situation and reclaim our life, perhaps we may have another 10-20 years. We should do that right now. And perhaps that is the message in this book. Thank you very much.
میرا آپ سے پہلا جو تعارف ہوا اس وقت آپ سی ڈی ایم ایس میں بیٹھتے تھے. میں شاید کسی خبر کی تلاش میں گیا تھا, لیکن جب آپ کے پاس گیا تو بہت کچھ آپ کے پاس چھوڑ کے آ گیا. اور جب بھی آپ سے میری ملاقات ہوئی 2 یا 3 بار ہوئی, اس کے بعد آپ ہو گئے, تو بہت سی باتیں آپ کی ابھی ایسی ہو رہی ہیں کہ شاید آپ کی لائف اس حادثے کے بعد تبدیل ہوئی. لیکن میں سمجھتا ہوں جو میں آپ کے ساتھ بیٹھا, آپ شاید پہلے بھی ایسے تھے. بہت سی اچھی سوچ میرے جیسے نوجوان کے لیے اس چیز کو 10 سال شاید ہو گئے, 8 سال ہو گئے جب آپ قومی بچت میں تھے ایز اے ڈی جی, تو سیکھا لے کے چلے, اور آج بھی کہیں نہ کہیں جس طرح یہاں تقریباً لوگ دیکھ رہا ہوں جتنے بھی بیٹھے ہیں ماشاء اللہ سے اپنی اپنی زندگی میں سمجھتا ہوں ان کے چہروں سے, ان کے بیٹھنے کے انداز سے ایک کامیاب لائف گزار رہے ہیں, گزار چکے ہیں. یہ ساری اپنی ذات میں ایک موٹیویشن سٹوری ہے ہر نوجوان کے لیے. کیا ایسا ممکن ہے جیسے قرب کی میں بات سن رہا تھا جہاز کی, فیک چیزوں پہ ان کا بلیف زیادہ ہو رہا ہے, یہ زندگی موت, زندگی کا مقصد, اور پھر اس حادثے کے بعد کیسے لے کے آپ چلے. کیا ایسا ممکن ہے کہ آپ نوجوانوں سے بات کریں, اور آج کے اس دور میں آپ سمجھتے ہیں کہ کتنا ضروری ہے, کیونکہ ہماری جو 60 سے اوپر پاپولیشن ہے وہ نوجوانوں میں مشتمل ہے. بہت شکریہ.
تھینک یو.
پاکستان آپ کا شکریہ ادا کرنا چاہتا ہوں کہ آپ اپنا جو انر ورلڈ ہے آفٹر دس ایکسپیرینس وہ ہم سے شیئر کر رہے ہیں, اور یہ کتاب لکھ کے آپ نے بڑا احسان کیا ہے. تو ایک تو شکریہ, میرا خیال ہے کہ اس کی میں ضرورت محسوس کرتا ہوں. دوسرا یہ ہے کہ جہاں بہت ساری ڈائمینشنس ہیں آپ کے ایکسپیرینس کی, اور آپ نے مختلف چیپٹرز میں بھی ان کا ذکر کیا ہے, اور آج جو آپ نے بات چیت کی اور جو سوالات ہیں ان میں بھی وہ اجاگر ہوئے ہیں بہت ساری ڈائمینشنس. لیکن ایک ڈائمینشن اس کی ایسی ہے جس کو آپ نے ٹچ تو کیا ہے لیکن آپ اس کو ایکسپینڈ نہیں کیا آپ نے بہت زیادہ. اور میں یہ سمجھتا ہوں کہ ایک اپرچونیٹی آپ کے ایکسپیرینس سے ایک بڑا اور طرح کا بھی ہمیں دستیاب ہوا ہے, اور وہ یہ ہے کہ ٹراما کے بعد یا المیہ کے بعد ہم جس طرح کی ذہنی کیفیت سے گزرتے ہیں اور اس میں جس طریقے سے اپنے آپ کو مینیج کرتے ہیں, جو مینٹل ہیلتھ ہماری ڈائمینشن ہے اس پوری چیز کی, اس کے بارے میں پاکستان کے اندر باوجود اس پہ بات نہیں کی جاتی. اور ہم کھانسی کی بات کر لیتے ہیں, پیٹ خراب ہو جاتا ہے بات کر لیتے ہیں, لیکن ڈپریشن کی بات نہیں کرتے, انگزائٹی کی بات نہیں کرتے, سوئیسائڈل انٹینشن کی بات نہیں کرتے, جو کہ ایک مینٹل ہیلتھ کا پرابلم ہے. تو میں یہ سمجھتا ہوں, اور میری آپ سے درخواست بھی ہے کہ آپ نے جس طریقے سے اپنا ایکسپیرینس ہمارے سامنے رکھا ہے, اس میں آپ ایک رول ماڈل بھی ہیں کہ جو اس بات سے ڈرتا نہیں کہ وہ جس طرح محسوس کرتا ہے اپنی ذہنی صحت کے حوالے سے وہ لوگوں کو بیان کرے, اور اس میں کوئی شرم محسوس نہ کرے, اس میں کوئی حجت نہ ہو, اس میں کوئی ہیزیٹیشن نہ ہو. تو میں چاہوں گا آج بھی اگر آپ کمفرٹیبل محسوس کرتے ہیں, اور فیوچر میں بھی ہم اس کے اوپر کام بھی کچھ کر رہے ہیں مل کے, کہ یہ جو سٹگما ہے مینٹل ہیلتھ کے بارے میں, ہم اس کو ذرا انریول کریں اور اس کے اوپر کھل کے کرج کے ساتھ اور حوصلے کے ساتھ بات کریں کہ اٹس اوکے ٹو ہیو مینٹل ہیلتھ ایشوز, اینڈ بٹ دیر آر آلسو ویز آف ڈیلنگ ود دیم. تھینک یو ویری مچ.
پہلا تو جو وسیم فرما رہے تھے اور جو ڈاکٹر صاحب نے بھی فرمایا تھا کتاب پہلے پوری لکھی, اچھا مدثر نے اس کا جواب دے دیا ہے. وہ رہی جو جون صاحب کا آپ نے شعر پڑھا, اس سے وہ بھی کافی چیزیں شیئر ہو جاتی ہیں. بعض اوقات ایسا ہوتا ہے کہ آپ اگر ادروائز بات کرتے ہیں ان چیزوں کے اوپر تو پیپل پر ہیوز ٹو ناٹ ٹیک یو ٹو سیریسلی. جو سیٹ 1C والا پورا معاملہ ہے نا, کہ پہلے تو آپ شروع 1C سے کریں, پھر اس کے اندر اپنی سارے ایکسپیرینسز کو ڈالیں. یہ مدثر بالکل ٹھیک فرما رہے ہیں. اس میں سے زیادہ تر لرننگز وہی ہیں جو میں ایسے ہی تھا پہلے بھی. جو لوگ مجھے پہلے سے جانتے ہیں, یہ لگ صاحب بیٹھے ہوئے, میرا بھائی بیٹھا ہوا ہے, یہ سب مجھے جانتے ہیں پہلے سے, یہ پچھلے 20 سال سے جانتے ہیں زہیر مجھے. میں ایسے ہی تھا ہمیشہ سے, مگر اگر یہ کریش نہیں ہوا تھا نا تو آپ لوگ میری بات نہیں سن رہے ہوتے. آپ کہہ رہے ہوتے یار یہ کہاں سے آ گیا, اٹھ کے ایک بینکر ہے, نوٹ گندا رہتا سارے دن, آج آ کے ہمیں یہاں پہ لیکچر دے رہا ہے کہ جی لائف کیا ہوتی ہے, کس طرح ہوتی ہے. وہ سب چیزیں جب ری انفورس ہوئی ہیں نا, عاطف نون می فار مینی ایئرز ناؤ, ان کو پتا ہے. یہ میں برتوانا صاحب فیملی ٹو می, ہی نوز, ایسے ہی تھا میں, یوں ہی ہوں, کوئی ایسا کوئی چینج نہیں آیا آفٹر دا کریش. یہ مہدی صاحب بیٹھے ہوئے, مہدی صاحب نوز, یہ سامنے بیٹھے ہوئے میرا بھائی اسکندر, ہی نوز, ایسے ہی تھا میں. یہ وہ لوگ ہیں جو 20-30 سال سے جانتے ہیں مجھے, ان کو پتا ہے میں یوں ہی تھا, اس طرح ہی سچا تھا, اتنا ہی وہ تھا, مگر وہ ری انفورس ہو گیا. آپ لوگ صرف اس لیے مجھے آج سن رہے ہیں بیکاز آپ نے کریش کی کہانی سننی تھی, اور اس کے بعد یہ چیزیں ری انفورس ہو گئی ہیں. تو یہ میرے لیے تو یہ اپرچونیٹی نکل آئی ہے کہ جو تھاٹس میری تھیں میں اس کو اسی کے اندر نکال کے آگے لے چلوں. اور سیٹ 1C کے اندر جو لکھا ہوا ہے وہ کچھ اور ہے, اسٹارٹنگ پوائنٹ سیٹ 1C ہے. جو سچی بات ہے وہ یہ کہ بک کے کور سے آپ نے اٹھایا ہے, لیکن اندر جو چیزیں لکھی ہوئی ہیں وہ وہی ہیں جو پہلے سے تھی, وہ ری انفورس ہو گئی ہے. سو دیٹ از دا ریزن وائی یہ کتاب پہلے نہیں لکھی گئی, کیونکہ میرا خیال تھا اس کو کوئی, مگر اب مجھے پتا ہے کہ جس کسی کی پذیرائی ہو رہی ہے اس کے بالکل ڈفرینٹ ڈائمینشن ہے, وہ چیزیں ری انفورس ہو گئی. مدثر جو آپ نے کہا, میرا تو آبجیکٹیو ہی ینگر لوگوں سے بات کرنے کا ہے, اور میں 2 جگہ یونیورسٹیز میں کر چکا ہوں کراچی میں. میری اب نیت یہ ہے کہ میں ینگر لوگوں سے ہی اس پہ بات کروں زیادہ سے زیادہ. اس پر کتاب ذرا تھوڑی سی مہنگی ہے تو ینگر لوگوں کے لیے افورڈ کرنا بھی تھوڑا مشکل ہو رہا ہے, تو اب میں پیپر بیگ کے ساتھ واپس آ رہی ہوں, اس کی قیمت آدھی ہو جائے گی, تو ینگر لوگوں کے لیے بھی پڑھنا جو ہے آسان ہو جائے گا. اور کوشش یہ ہوگی کہ جی سر وہ ٹرانسلیشن شروع ہو گئی ہے. میں ایکچولی بڑا آنرڈ ہوں ڈاکٹر صاحب کہ ڈاکٹر امجد ثاقب صاحب, لیجنڈری ڈاکٹر امجد ثاقب جو ہے, انہوں نے پک کر لیا کہ میں اس کو اردو میں ٹرانسلیٹ کروں گا, بلکہ انہوں نے 50 صفحے ٹرانسلیٹ کر بھی دی ہیں اس کے آلریڈی. تو آلریڈی اردو ٹرانسلیشن از انڈر وے, اردو ٹرانسلیشن بھی اور جو وہ ہے اس کا ینگر لوگوں سے بات کرنے کا، وہ ذرا میں تھوڑا سا آڈیو جو ہے نا وہ پبلشر نے تھوڑا سا گڑبڑ کی ہوئی ہے، وہ کہتا ہے اس میں پیسے نہیں بنتے، تو اس لیے میں اس کو اس وقت نکالوں گا جب ناٹ دا لوکل پبلشر، انٹرنیشنل. ہاں یہاں سے ہو جائے گا، وہ کوئی مسئلہ نہیں. اے آئی زندہ باد بائی دی وے. somebody told me کہ انہوں نے اس کو اسکین کرا کے اور اے آئی میں ڈال کے اس کو آلریڈی جو ہے نا وہ آڈیو بک بنوا بھی دی اپنے فادر کے لیے، ان کے فادر سننا چاہتے تھے کتاب. تو وہ جگاڑو تو ہم بڑے پرانے ہیں، ہم جوڑ لیا ہم نے اس کا جگاڑ. ڈاکٹر صاحب جو آپ فرما رہے وہ بالکل میں نے تو آج بھی، بلکہ وہ پریزیڈنٹ صاحب نے اس کو ذکر کو چھیڑا، میں نے آج بھی اس پہ بہت بات کی ہے مینٹل ہیلتھ کے اوپر. میں تو یہاں تک کہہ دیا کہ آفٹر سچ ٹاکس آئی نیڈ ٹو اینڈ آئی ول گو تھرو اے مینٹل ہیلتھ. تو میں تو اس میں بہت بات کرتا ہوں، مگر غالباً آج میں نے اس کو اتنی زیادہ بات اس لیے نہیں کی کیونکہ جو مل کر کا ایونٹ کراچی میں تھا اس میں نے فوکس ہی سارا کا سارا مینٹل ہیلتھ پہ رکھا تھا، اور وہ کیونکہ اسپیکٹ بہت زیادہ کور ہو گیا ہے. تو جسٹ ٹو بریک دا monotony آف آل دوز بک ٹاکس I thought I'm going to pick up all those subjects which are more relevant to the audience and to the venue. And اگر آپ آج دیکھیں گے تو جو ہماری ابھی بارڈر کے اوپر پورا کانفلکٹ چل رہا ہے، میں نے اس کے حساب سے arrogance, sincerity of decisions and communication کو اٹھایا تھا، کیونکہ میرے خیال سے وہ سب سے کرنٹ اور سب سے ٹاپیکل ایشو ہے. دین مینٹل ہیلتھ، تو پرہیپس اتنی شاید مینٹل ہیلتھ کو آج اٹینشن نہیں مل پائی، بٹ نیورتھلیس I think I tried to cover it still to an extent possible.
Appreciate you sharing your experience with us, and I'm very eager to write about it. My name is Zoya Anwar. I was going to ask about the same issue that Sir Dr. Zafar has discussed. Most people, after going through such a traumatic experience, would like to forget about this experience. You chose to relive it by writing a book about it. Where did you find that strength? How did you deal with reliving the trauma again? That would be my question. Thank you very much.
There's a different dimension about Zafar which I want to talk, and this is post-trauma. And I remember I had a talk with him and he said, I want to do more for poor people in Pakistan, particularly Punjab. So he actually opened up the Bank of Punjab for the poor people of Pakistan. I think there are about more than 20 commercial banks in Pakistan. Bank of Punjab is one of them. But if you look at their balance sheet today and the kind of help they are giving through different institutions, millions of people are getting benefit out of it. If you look at it today with the government of Punjab, the kind of things which are doing, یہ مجھے ڈانٹتے رہتے ہیں آپ کام نہیں کر رہے، زیادہ نہیں کر رہے، about this housing and other things. So all I'm trying to say is that Zafar Saab, the question is, did it take you the seat, one seat, to then change your perspective toward life and then look at it from a different angle which you have done now? And what is the message for your other colleagues in commercial banks? I wish that if everybody starts having this perspective, there would be a very big dent in poverty today in this country. Because the most important missing link is access to capital in this country, even today. And so if Bank of Punjab can do it through Zafar Masud, the question here is that why can't everybody else do it? And does it need another air crash for everybody to do it, or should it do it on itself? So this is the question, sir. Thank you.
یوتھ پارلیمنٹ آف پاکستان کا ینگسٹرس کی بات ہو رہی ہے تو میں اپنا پلیٹ فارم آپ کو پرووائڈ کرنا چاہوں گا کہ آپ ینگسٹرس جو کہ ہمارے 20,000 ابو ممبرز ہیں اکراس پاکستان، تو آپ ان سے بھی انٹریکٹ کریں، چونکہ بیسیکلی ہم ینگسٹرس سمجھتے ہیں کہ ظفر مسعود صاحب شاید ایسے ہی پیدا ہوئے، ینگسٹرس کے ساتھ لازمی شیئر کریں تاکہ ہمیں پتہ چلے کہ آپ کی جو اسٹرگل ہے اوور آل وہ کیا رہی ہے، تاکہ ینگسٹر سے سیکھ بھی سکیں. اور بیسیکلی بھی آپ نے جو کہ بک لکھی ہے سب لوگ آپ کو اپریشیٹ کر رہے ہیں، تو میری بھی چھوٹی سی اپریسیشن ہے آپ کی بک کے لیے، اس کو آپ ایکسیپٹ کریں پلیز. اور دوسرا یہاں پہ آپ لکی بھی ہیں کہ آپ نے اپنی لائف میں خود اپنی بک لکھی ہے، جو کہ یہاں پہ اکثر پھر ہوتا ہے کہ ڈرگس کے پیچھے لکھا ہوتا ہے کہ تیری یاد آئی تیرے جانے کے بعد. آپ لکی ہیں اور مودت صاحب یہاں بیٹھے ہیں، اور میری آپ کے ساتھ آج سیکنڈ انٹریکشن ہے کیونکہ آپ ماشاء اللہ فلانتھروپی ورک بھی کافی کرتے ہیں. آپ نے پاکستان 100% وزٹ کیا تھا جب ہمارے یوتھ پارلیمنٹ کے چیئرمین ابراہیم صاحب نے کو انوائٹ کیا تھا. तो आप वो काम भी अच्छा करते हैं, तो मैं चाहूँगा उसको भी हाईलाइट करें ताकि यंगस्टर्स उससे भी सीखें, चूँकि आज तालीम से ज़्यादा तरबियत की भी ज़रूरत है और सोशल वर्क की भी ज़रूरत है। उसकी मैं एक छोटी सी एग्जांपल देना चाहूँगा आपको कि मैं अक्सर जब यंगस्टर से बात करता हूँ, मेरा आज भी आप सबसे सवाल वही होगा कि मुझे आप ये बताएं कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर कितने प्रेसिडेंट और कितने प्राइम मिनिस्टर यहाँ से गुजरे हैं, जो भी जा चुके हैं। टोटल मेरे ख्याल से कोई 12 या 14 होंगे, लेकिन किसी को भी उन सब के नाम याद नहीं है। टोटल थोड़े से हैं, कोई 10-12 ही हैं, लेकिन चंद के नाम याद हैं, सब के नाम याद नहीं है। लेकिन अगर मैं बात करूं कि 2016 के अंदर एक शख्सियत जो अब में नहीं रही, वो कौन थी, जो अक्सर बेवाओं के साथ, यतीमों के साथ, बेकसों के साथ, बेसहारों के साथ नज़र आती थी, तो सबको नाम याद होगा कि डॉक्टर फुस्ताई साहब, ठीक है। तो वो बेसिकली ये डिफरेंट है दुनिया की ज़िंदगी में और एक सोशल वर्क के हवाले से, तो ये सब कंसिडर कीजिएगा प्लीज़। थैंक यू।
Thank you. Can we have
insightful discussion on the communication, on the arrogance और on the communication, और इसमें गिल्ट का भी जिक्र आया और डॉक्टर साहब ने प्लेन क्रैश करने का भी जिक्र किया। तो इससे जो कॉल फॉर एक्शन मैंने फील की है आफ्टर लिसनिंग टू ऑल दीज पार्टिसिपेंट्स एंड फ्रॉम योर साइड, कि ज़िंदगी इतनी गनीमत तो नहीं जिसके लिए अहदे कम ज़र्फ़ की हर बात गवारा कर ले। थैंक यू वेरी मच सर।
Thank you, please.
Because you are the privileged one. You are the privileged one who earned it, but you owe this now to the rest. So please, that is one. मैंने तो यही इसमें आर्ग्यू किया है किताब में और इसी को कहने की कोशिश की है। Reliving, you know, was not easy and it's still not easy. इस तरह मैंने पहले भी आपसे कहा, ये आसान नहीं है और मेरा ख्याल है कि मैं उसको recognize नहीं करता, but it tend to take toll on you. It does take toll on you, which you realize once things simmer down. So आज का जब दिन ख़त्म होगा, अभी 2 पॉडकास्ट हैं, सोहेल मेरे भाई यहाँ बैठे हुए, सोहेल भट्टी साहब उनके साथ पॉडकास्ट है, फिर एक और आसमा शराजी साहब के साथ पॉडकास्ट है। वो मैं इस्लामाबाद आया हूँ तो मैं ये सब एक साथ करके जाऊँगा, बट मुझे अंदाज़ा है कि शाम में जो है ना वो काफ़ी इमोशनली चार्ज सिचुएशन होगी, एंड दैट्स द रीज़न वाई डॉक्टर साहब मैंने ये एडमिट किया कि मुझे गालिबन ज़रूरत है कि मैं दोबारा जाऊं अपने साइकोलॉजिस्ट के पास और उससे ज़रा कंसल्ट करना शुरू करूं, बिकॉज दिस इज़ द नीड ऑफ द आवर। सो इट्स नॉट इजी, बट देन जोया हम सब यहाँ जो पैदा हुए हैं वो आसान काम करने के लिए तो फिर यूँ ही गुजर जाएंगे, कुछ भी नहीं होगा। और कितने लोग हैं जिनको ये अपॉर्चुनिटी मिली है कि वो ये शेयर कर सकें चीज़ों को, ऑल्दो वो मुदस्सर कह रहे थे और बाकी लोग कह रहे थे, ये रीइंफोर्स हुए मेरे बहुत सारे वो तो नई लर्निंग है ना, और वो नई लर्निंग जो है वो मैं ये समझता हूँ कि चाहे जितना मर्जी ट्रोमेटिक हो, आई ओ दिस टू पीपल एंड आई मस्ट शेयर इट विद देम irrespective of what toll it takes on me, because for the larger benefit of people I need to talk about and get that sorted out. बाजवा साहब ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਦੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ, ਪਰ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਸਰ ਕਿ tell you the truth, I'm just being lucky that I happen to be in Bank of Punjab, which tend to have the focus towards development. Interestingly enough, banking per se as a business is totally a capitalist business. ਜਿਹਦੇ you know जो ह्यूमन एलिमेंट है गालिबन उतना ज़्यादा प्रोनाउंस नहीं होता या इम्पैक्टफुल नहीं होता जितना होना चाहिए, बट नेवरदलेस दैट इज़ देयर। बट आई हैव जस्ट हैपन टू बी इन अ पोजीशन वेयर आई हैव दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी कि जो डीएनए उस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का है वो भी ऐसा है कि जो इम्पैक्ट की बात करता है, और मुझे एक हेल्प मिल गई कि मैं उसको रीइंफोर्स कर दूं और मैं उसको परसू कर लूं और आगे लेके चलूं। क्रैश से पहले भी बाजवा साहब काफ़ी हद तक आप तो मुझसे उस वक्त भी मिले जब मैं नेशनल सेविंग्स में था, उस वक्त भी इम्पैक्ट, ये मेरा भाई यहाँ बैठा हुआ है, अवकाश पता नहीं बैठा हुआ है चला गया, करन दास का, जिसका मैं बहुत बड़ा एडमायरर हूँ, और जो काम ये कर रहे हैं वो रियली समथिंग विच इज़ एग्जाम्पलरी। तो वकास को पता है कि हमेशा से जो है वो एक इम्पैक्ट का मेरे जहन में और हमेशा सेंटर ऑफ द डिसीजन रहा है। प्रॉब्लम ये है बाजवा साहब कि हम लॉन्ग टर्म और मीडियम टर्म सोचना नहीं चाहते, हम शॉर्ट टर्म चक्रों में पड़े रहते हैं। ये अगर आप लार्जर स्कीम ऑफ थिंग्स में देखें ना, तो ये जो हम बात कर रहे हैं इम्पैक्ट ऑफ पीपल, ये एक्चुअली वी आर इन्वेस्टिंग इन द, एज अ कैपिटलिस्ट आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट, वी आर इन्वेस्टिंग इन द मीडियम टर्म सस्टेनेबिलिटी ऑफ आवर बिजनेस। اگر آپ لٹریچر اور اکانومی اور ایجوکیشن کی بات نہیں کریں گے نا تو آپ کا بزنس بھی میڈیم ٹو لانگ ٹرم میں کہیں نہ کہیں جا کے پھنس جائے گا. اٹ ول ناٹ کنٹینیو ٹو گرو دا وے اٹس گروئنگ, اور جس لیول پہ گرو کر سکتا ہے اس لیول پہ گرو نہیں کر پائے گا. ہم وہ شارٹ ٹرم ویو لیتے ہیں, ہم لانگ ٹرم ویو نہیں لیتے. تو اگر آپ ویسٹڈ انٹرسٹ بھی دیکھیں, اور جو پورا میرا آرگیومنٹ ہے, میرا پورا اس پہ ایک آرٹیکل ہے لٹریچر اینڈ اکانومی پہ, جس کو اب میں اور آمنہ ایکسپینڈ کرنے کی کوشش کر رہے ہیں انٹو اے بک. میرا لگتا یہ ہے کہ ٹائمنگ کے حساب سے شاید وہ 2 سال بعد آئے گی ابھی, کیونکہ ابھی تو یہی چل رہا ہے. پھر اس کے بعد اس کا اردو ورژن آئے گا. پھر وی فرسٹ اسٹارٹیڈ ورکنگ آن دی ادر ون, جو فائنینشیل انکلوژن والی جو آپ نے بات کی تھی. کسی اور نے بھی وہ بات کی فائنینشیل انکلوژن کی, کہ کس طرح وہ ایک مائنڈ سیٹ چینج کرتا ہے اور پیس آتی ہے اور ٹالرنس آتی ہے اور سوسائٹی اوور آل ایک اس میں ایک بہتری آتی ہے. تو وہ ضرور تھا, مگر ایک چیز ضرور کریش کے بعد ہوئی ہے باجوہ صاحب, اور وہ یہ ہوئی ہے کہ ارجنسی, جو پریزیڈنٹ صاحب نے بھی وہ اس میں سے پڑھا, وہ ارجنسی جو ہے نا وہ میں نے ریئلائز کر لی ہے کہ اب چیزوں کو ویٹ نہیں کرنا, بیکاز یو ڈونٹ نو ایز انڈیویجول لیول ویدر آپ یہ ایفیمرل نیچر آف دا جو ہے نا آپ کی لائف, اس کا کچھ پتہ نہیں باجوہ صاحب. تو سیڑھیوں تو ڈگ کے مر جائیے, وہ تو جہاز بچ گیا سی تھے. تو جو کرنا ہے ابھی کر لیں, جو کسی کو کہنا ہے ابھی کہہ لیں, کسی کو پیار محبت کی 2 باتیں کرنی ہیں وہ آج کر لیں, اس کو ڈیلے مت کریں. پیسے آپ نہیں دیں گے بینک کے واپس تو غالباً وہ معاف ہو جائیں گے, اللہ بھی معاف کر دے. مگر باجوہ صاحب میرا پیار نہ گالنے کی تھے, وہ بڑا پھر مسئلہ پائے گا آگے. دس از واٹ مائی بلیف از. آج کر لیں, جو کرنا ہے وہ کر لیں. تو وہ سینس آف ارجنسی جو ہے نا وہ میرے اندر ضرور آ گئی ہے کہ جو چیزیں کرنی ہیں وہ ابھی کر لو, وداؤٹ اینی ڈیلے اینڈ وداؤٹ اینی. رضائی صاحب آپ تو آلریڈی کنکلوسولی آپ نے بات کر دی, تو آئی ریئلی ڈونٹ ہیو ٹو کامنٹ آن دس. آپ درست فرمائے, شکریہ بہت بہت.
Research Institute for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Masud sir, for sparing our time, sparing your time and honoring us. I would not like to waste much of your time. I think we had a wonderful discussion today about the book. It's a must read, and as I said in my opening remarks, this book has been written by a self-actualized man who was already a self-actualized person, but this seed once he gave him that exposure which probably Allah Almighty wanted, and through his personality we have all learned a lot, we have unlearned a lot in this book. So I would request every one of you to read this, and this book is basically for posterity. This book is not for people like us who have already lived most of their life. This is the book for the young lot of Pakistan, and I truly hope that we keep getting these types of guidances without any catastrophe, without any accident. We keep getting people like Zafar Masud sahab who come out just in a natural course and write, and irrespective of their field of expertise. We develop this intellect ourselves, our new generation develop this intellect in themselves to read the content, not to read the person. Thank you very much once again. All shukriya.